Why is it not projecting? Oh, what you did? Oh, I'm not. It's I so it does. You'll here, it is on the slide right after. Oh, you can't. Okay. So we did. It is correct on here. He's gonna go after you. Jim's gonna see. It's gonna be me, you, and then he'll go. Yes, I just wanted to show. And the clicker is.
Get it started. If everyone could take their seats, please. Good evening. Welcome to the Conval School Board Community Forum, both to the audience here in the Lucy Hurlin Theater and to our online audience. I'm Tom Burgess, School Board Representative from Peterborough, and I'll be serving as the forum's moderator. Tonight, we will be going over in detail the warrant articles the Conval community will be voting on this March 11th. First, Dr. Ann Forrest, our superintendent, will discuss the district budget. I will review the collective bargaining agreement. Then Jim Frederickson, School Board Representative from Sharon, will discuss the trust fund warrants. Dick Dunning, School Board Representative from Peterborough, will address the petition warrant article. And finally, Mike Hoyt, School Board Representative from Bennington, and Curtis Hamilton, School Board Representative from Greenfield, will go over the withdrawal proposals from Dublin and Francistown. After all the presentations have concluded, all of the speakers will come back to the stage to answer questions. We will take questions from our live audience and from our at-home audience. People watching at home can email questions to forum@conval.edu. When you do ask your question, please limit it to 2 minutes so that everyone has a chance to have their question addressed. 2 minutes is how much time I've taken just now, so that's plenty of time for a question. So please keep your questions focused so that we can answer it and the next person can get their question asked also. So now, without further ado, Dr. Ann will address the budget.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Ann Forrest, Superintendent of the Conval School District. I'm going to share with you information about our budget process. And I want to start by saying, as the district has sued the state, we are very aware of the burden that is placed on our local taxpayers. And that is very much in our minds as we develop a budget. This year's proposed operating budget, you can see, is $59,021,446. That's a 3.13% increase over this year's budget. And then we have our proposed gross budget, which includes the total amount of our projected costs and our anticipated revenues for the fiscal year. As we develop the budget, also forefront in our mind are the students that we serve. And that is our number one priority. Also forefront in our mind is we have a strategic plan that had lots of community input that also shapes the direction we move forward in. We have budget assumptions. So we have financial assumptions. So these are our fixed costs that we don't have much control over. We also have our procedural assumptions that support the mission, vision, and values of the district. It's where we look at class size and our teacher to student ratio, our caseload, special education caseloads. And then we have our programmatic assumptions. So looking at our educational programming. As you can see, if you've come to these before, we usually show this. You can see that staffing makes up 75% of our budget between the salaries and benefits. I'm going to bring you through. Administrators and the board went through the proposed budget multiple times, and we really did bring like a red pen to things. And so you'll see where we made reductions. In staffing, you'll see that there was a decrease of $225,000, and we really reached that by looking at our class size guidelines and making sure we were right sizing, matching teachers to the number of students that we have. So that went down, but you'll also see our benefits went up, even though the cost of staffing went down. And that is reflective of the 14% health increase and the 5% dental increase, which Dick Dunning was saying earlier, that has been an ongoing. Last year it was 25%, this year it's 14%. That is something we do not have control over, but it causes us some heartache. Purchase services, you'll see that we have a decrease, and that is a big part of that is a result in a change in our custodial services. So we are continually looking at how we can do what we do for less and more efficiently. Property service, there's a slight increase. We did have some decreases in service rates, but these were offset by repairs to our fire alarms and sprinkler systems, and we needed to replace an HVAC unit. Other services also went up. Transportation and tuition, this is another area that we are really combating, transportation is a real challenge right now. We need to provide transportation for special education students in certain situations, students who are unhoused, and we need to, that is an obligation that we have that is mandated by law. Supplies, we see that there was a decrease in, or there was an increase in some general supplies, but it was offset by a decrease in utility rates. Property, we see an increase. This is a significant increase in this line. This is due to, we had ESSER funds for the last couple of years. That's federal funding. That funding is now gone. So this increase is reflecting things that needed to go back into the general operating budget because that federal funding is no longer available. We had a decrease in dues, fees, and debt service. So it's really showing, we looked through dues and fees for administrators and co-curriculars and athletics, and those were reduced. And we have no current bonds. Our default budget, you can see a default budget. We have to create our default budget, we start with this current year's budget, and then we need to reduce or increase based on contracts, obligations mandated by law. We need to take out any one-time expenditures. We also need to take out if we built in any positions, or if we took out any positions when we created next year's budget, those stay out. And that brings us to a operating default budget that is different to the proposed by $893,297. So I'm going to turn it over to Tom, and I'm happy to answer questions when we get to the Q&A, but I will again state that we really worked hard to keep the budget as low as possible, and really we literally went through line by line and questioned everything we had in the budget. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to be covering warrant Article 3, the collective bargaining agreement. The the school board negotiated a 2-year contract with the Conval Education Association. The current contract expires at the end of the school year. The new agreement would run from July 1st, 2025 to June 30th, 2027. I was a member of the school board's negotiating team, along with several other school board members. The agreement covers teachers, special service providers, and paraprofessionals. We know what teachers are. Special service providers include nurses, occupational therapists, and speech and language therapists, for example. Paraprofessionals are staff who provide a variety of services. They could work full-time one-to-one with a student with special needs. They can also serve as a teaching assistant, work with small group of students under a teacher's supervision. As you can see, the salary increases were in the 2.63 range, 2.63 average for the teachers, for the SSPs, the special service providers, 2.64, and the paraprofessionals was the highest, and that was done in order to keep the our salaries competitive in this entry-level market. The contract also revised the department head stipends. The department heads for the different departments get a $4,500 stipend for being the department chair. And we also recognized that that was something we needed to give to the nurse, a nurse who chooses to be the lead school nurse and performs a variety of duties for that stipend. In addition, we negotiated an increase for the coaches and the co-curricular advisors. The stipend has not been raised in many years. It was overdue for an adjustment. That money is spread over the $42,500 for fiscal year 26 is spread over all the coaches for the varsity and JV and all the advisors for the clubs and activities. So it's money that is covering a lot of different people. That's the total amount that's spread among all the different people who are involved. As Ann mentioned and Dick mentioned also, and we'll bring up again, I think, we are being challenged by our healthcare premium costs. And so what we've done with the negotiations is try to work with the CVEA to have them take on more of the costs of their healthcare premiums. At one point, looking back on our history, at one point we were covering 88% of the premium. That is now going to be cut down to 82.5% from the Conval side, and the teachers and staff will be covering 17.5% of the premium. They're going to pick up an extra 0.5% for each of the 2 years of this contract. We also introduced a lower cost healthcare option. With that healthcare option, there's a potential for savings for both the school district and for the staff member. For the lower cost healthcare option, we would cover 90% Conval, and the staff member would only be responsible for 10%. But the option is cheaper. It's cheaper because it's not as good. You don't get anything for free. So the healthcare option is not as robust, not as comprehensive as the healthcare option that we have, and that's as I say here, it's a fiscal choice and it's a healthcare choice. We all have to do that with our own budgets, decide whether or not we're going to pay for a healthcare option that we may have offered to us, or we might get some kind of financial incentive to not take that healthcare benefit. And that's something that we're including to the staff. We cannot project how many staff members may opt for this. That's a personal decision. You know, I was thinking about myself. My children are all grown, so that's not something that I have to worry about, providing health care for them. But if I had my children still at home, that might be something that I wouldn't consider. So that's something that each staff member is going to have to decide for themselves. We think it will apply to a good number of them. And if it does, they'll save money. The school district will save money. We also added into the contract the ability to add different healthcare plans if our healthcare provider adds additional healthcare offerings. So that's something we haven't been able to do in the past. We locked in with the healthcare for the length of the contract. Now, if different healthcare plans become available, we can offer them to the staff. We also reduced the number of training days for new employees from 10 to 5. So that's going to have an associated cut in costs with reduced training. That's that's what we lose, but we save some money by not having those additional staff training days. And that is the contract, the highlights of it. Now we have Jim Frederickson from Sharon who's going to talk about the trust fund warrants.
Well, I'm Jim Frederickson from Sharon. I'm the chairman of the Budget Property Committee and also the Negotiation Committee. I'm sorry that Greg Leonard couldn't be here tonight. He was the chair of the Union's Negotiation Committee, and when we shook hands, we all recognized it was clearly a win-win. We're very happy with the contract. And I'd like to recognize my fellow board members. We had a great team. They had a great team. This is a good deal. Comment about the health insurance. 2 years ago, we have a budget workshop every November, and we had Kimberly had done all the work, and just the day before that morning of the workshop, she came in and said, "Jim, I got a problem." I said, "What's that?" She said, "Our health care insurance just went up 25%. 25%. That was the whole budget increase. It was 25%. We had to take 1.7 million out of everything else. And this is a good lead in the trust funds, by the way, because we do have a healthcare trust fund. And the purpose of that trust fund was in the past, the healthcare provider would give us a number, a not to exceed number. And we look at the not to exceed number, we kind of take a guess of what the healthcare might be. We decide we want to budget the full amount and give it all back if it came lower, or do we want to budget lower and use a healthcare maintenance fund to cover the difference, to hedge our bets a little bit. Well, this year we got a 14%. The two main policies that employees use, 14% and 9% increase in those two premiums. And we took a different approach because the healthcare provider, after all the school districts around the state says, "You can't do this anymore. We need to know the number." They're going to give us a number now. We can budget it. It also means we're going to be able to take that healthcare fund. I'm going to show you the numbers here, and we can take that down. I'll show you the numbers in a minute, but we are going to take $500,000 out of the trust fund this year, give it back to the taxpayer. Everything else I'm going to talk about is going the other way. So real basics, business. I mean, basic on any budget, they all share common characteristics, right? If you're in a business, you strive for profits, or you hope for savings. Excuse me. And the federal government doesn't even try, right? They really don't. Some states do, some don't. Schools are different. Municipalities are different. We use different terms. We use appropriations instead of costs. We use revenues instead of income. So the terms are different, but the goal has to be by mandate, our appropriations have to equal the revenue, has to by state law. I'm saying that for a reason. So if you look at the wording of the special warrant articles, just walk through it. I've got all the highlighted words. There's the word appropriate to the trust fund and fund balance. So there's trust funds, balances, and there's fund balances. It's very confusing terminology. We raise and appropriate. So when you vote to approve the budget, you raise and appropriate money as a legislative body. When you approve these warrant articles, you raise and appropriate the dollars. And it comes from the unassigned fund balance. Again, there's that word fund balance again. Available as of July 1st with no amount to be raised for taxation. That sounds like a good deal. But what you really don't understand is that this is conditional. You got to approve this request and the money has to be available. What do I mean by that? We'll get to that in a second. So the unused fund balance is determined at the end of the year. It's like the surplus at the end of the year. If we don't spend money, we've got it left over. There are three things that we can do with it. You can allow us to put it in the trust fund to increase the balance. These are the trust funds listed in the middle there: building, equipment, athletics, health maintenance, special education, energy efficiency, and technology. You can allow us to put it in the trust funds, save it for a rainy day, or I got Parkinson's. I can't control my hand. I'm sorry. I'm not nervous. I just can't control it. We can use it for trust funds. A couple of years ago, we had an option. The towns had this option before. We just got this option 2 years ago. We can retain some for rainy days, or we can return it to we call it return it. We call it returning the to the taxpayer. We don't actually return it. It just reduces the district assessment. That's a big word to remember. So that district assessment is treated as local revenue in the following year. And that's important if you want to understand your tax bills. And we decided to take the discussion of tax bills out tonight because we have so many other things to talk about important. So the fund balance, if there's funds left over from this fiscal year, this June 30th, we can take that money and the board decides you decide what the first 925,000 down at the bottom left-hand corner there, if you can see it, what we're asking for. If there's money available, we'll fund them in order of priority. We'll put $500,000 in the building capital trust fund, which is used, you all drove in the nice parking lot this morning or this evening, and any day you've been here. 2 years ago it was a mess, right? 3 years ago, we used trust funds to pay for that. We're going to use $500,000 from the health maintenance trust, not shown there, it's going to go out. We're going to put $25,000 in the energy efficiency fund. That's a new fund we started a couple years ago. We built it up to about $400,000 now. The intention of that is when the contract with the installer, the what do we call them, the owner of the solar system, we're going to buy it out. All the savings that generate will be ours. It'll be our system. We just need a little bit more to top that off. But we also been using energy funds. You walk through all these hallways, and Tim can give you all the details. And the guys have done a tremendous job of reducing the electrical load, the high efficiency lighting. We're doing everything we can think of, facilities wise, teacher wise, to keep the cost down. And then if there's more than, so if you had, there's 500 available for the building trust fund, then there's another 25 we'll put in energy efficiency, then we'll go back, put another 400 in the building trust fund, because there's not gonna be any bond this year. We heard you. No high school, we heard you. We listen. Some of you think we don't, we listen. So back to the final chart, Ann talked about the operating budget. I just talked about the trust funds. You can see how the trust fund doesn't impact the district assessment, because if we have dollars in from previous years, it equals dollars out. Okay? So the thing to remember here is that whatever difference there is between all our revenues and our costs equals district assessment. That's what has to be raised in local taxes. And we didn't have on the agenda today a discussion of why our tax bills went up so much last year. So many things happened at the same time. It was like I tried to write I thought of the concept of perfect storm, right? 5 out of the 7 towns, 5 out of the 9 towns had their towns reassessed. That makes it very difficult to compare your taxes one year to the other. We had a number of the towns had huge municipal budget increases. Your tax bill is 4 pieces. We're the biggest piece, but we're only one piece of it. Just a lot of stuff happened. If you're interested in the details of that, there's a financial article we wrote, and it's available on our site. So I think now we get into some fun stuff.
So now, Dick Dunning, school representative from Peterborough, will discuss the budget cap petition warrant article.
This is the petition warrant article that was brought forward that'll be on the ballot this year. I'm not going to read it to you, but I do want to bring your eyes to the highlighted area that says available on January 1st. We added that wording to the warrant article. Legal counsel told us that really that had to be in there to make this a legal petition article. We brought it to the floor at the deliberative session. People voted in. So the change that we made from the original petition on warrant article was the availability on January 1st. Though we refer to this as a cap, the reality is when we looked at what the funding impact would be, it would be a budget cut. First year, we'd be looking at a $2,256,923 reduction in the budget. Following year would be $5,461,637 reduction in the budget. We had a public hearing earlier here where we talked about what would the impact be. When this was brought to our attention, I spoke to the superintendent, and in the past, we've had experiences with reductions. And at that time, we looked at, you start away from the classroom and you work your way so that it has least impact on the classroom. So you look at all those things that would not have a direct impact on daily instruction. What this would mean is if we cut all supplies, all technology, athletics, both at the high school and the middle school, that's all athletics. Co-curricular leadership opportunities, if we cut all of those. If we cut all enrichment programs, cornucopia, Harris Center is one that people would recognize right off. And reduction in curricular offerings. If we cut all of those, if we eliminated 4 to 5 administrators, if we eliminated 4 to 5 additional staffing, 3 to 4 paraprofessionals, if we eliminated 10 to 12 teaching positions, we still would not reach that $2 million cut. We often hear there's been a reduction in student population, there should be a reduction in teachers. This little graph kind of speaks to that. If you have a classroom in one school with 20 kids with one teacher, if those 20 kids left from that one classroom, you might have a reduction, but that isn't the way it works. You have a reduction in the 13 schools. So you could have 2 from one school, 3 from another, and you total up to 20 kids, but it's not all from one school. Therefore, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. It doesn't work that way. Here are the challenges that we face every single day as a board. Unmandated mandates. The thing that jumps out to me at the most is a reduction in special ed. We are looking at a $164 million cut in funding from the state for special ed. That concerns me greatly and the board. A decrease in the revenues. You can see all these things that affect educational funding. We have a budget process that we've gone through. We've tried very hard to keep the budget as lowest as we could. 51 years I've been here. If this petition warrant article were to pass, it would be the most devastating thing I've seen in 51 years. It would virtually wipe out everything that makes Conval Conval. I encourage you to look carefully at what this would mean to you and your children within this district. I shared earlier with the public hearing here in Peterborough, and we're having one in all 9 towns. But one of the things that always touched my heart as a building principal was co-curricular and what it did for kids. And I shared the story of a little 5th grade girl who joined one of our co-curricular activities. It was a 4-H program. It was called Green Eggs and Hams. And they raised chickens, and then they would show their chickens. It warmed my heart to see these kids actually show and talk about a chicken. So every club would usually get a sweatshirt with their name on it, their club designation on it, and they would wear it with pride during a school day. This little fifth grader got her t-shirt, and I got this story directly from the mom. She came home with that sweatshirt and she held it up and she said, "Mom, look, I'm somebody." Now you think about that. For a kid to feel like they belong is so critical in our education system today. We hear the stories all the time of kids who feel like they don't belong. These are the kinds of things that make kids feel like they belong. We can't lose that. We can't lose that. So I ask you to think very long and deep in your heart about, I'm somebody. Thank you.
Our last presenters for this evening will be Mike Hoyt from Bennington and Curtis Hamilton from Greenfield, and they will be addressing the withdrawal proposals from Dublin and Francistown.
I'm Mike Hoyt from Bennington, and I'm going to go through a little history around the withdrawal for you. And then Curtis is going to be giving you a lot more detail. The withdrawal process started in March of 24 when Dublin and Francistown at their town meetings voted to ask the Conval School District to initiate a withdrawal study that would look at the feasibility and suitability of the two towns withdrawing from the Conval School District. As part of that withdrawal study, a committee had to be put together, and that committee's makeup was designed by law. And there were one selectmen from each town and one school board member from each town. We met 2 times a month for several months. That withdrawal study both looked at details of financials around the school district and the elementary schools in those 2 towns. It looked at several financial studies that had been done. It talked about the ability of those towns to educate their students if they were to withdraw. We had the education committees from each of those 2 towns came in and spoke to the committee about what their plans would be and how they would follow through with withdrawal if it was approved. The final outcome or final task that we had was based upon all the study that was done for the summer. We had to come up with a recommendation as far as whether the committee felt that it would be feasible and suitable for each of those towns separately to withdraw from the district. The final vote that the committee came up with was that by a 9-6 vote, it was voted that they felt that they should not recommend withdrawal for Dublin, and by a 8-7 vote that they should not recommend withdrawal for Francistown. After the decision was made, the next steps were that reports had to be made, and they had to be filed with both the school district and the State Board of Education. Because the decision by the committee was not to recommend withdrawal, we had to write a majority report that was forwarded to the State Board. Each of the 2 towns felt that they should go forward with withdrawal. So they each wrote a minority report that was filed with the State Department. In the late fall, the Department of Ed, the state board met to have a hearing on those withdrawal petitions. At that point in time, the state board decided that their vote was to allow both of those towns to go forward with the withdrawal. So what you see on the ballot will be the next step in the process, which is withdrawal votes need to be taken both in each of the two towns that are withdrawing and also the entire district. Those will occur in March of this coming year. As far as the proposals go, 50% of the people in Dublin and Francistown need to vote in favor of allowing them to withdraw. And even though it says 50%, in actuality, the law states a majority. So it has to be 50% plus one more vote. If the rest of the district also needs 50% of the vote to allow them to withdraw. So it needs to be the 50% vote in the town and the 50% vote with the rest of the district. It used to be that was how the law was stipulated, but recently the legislature added another stipulation, which is if 60% or a supermajority of the voters in each of those towns vote for withdrawal, then withdrawal will go forward unless 60% of the rest of the district votes no. If the vote passes in those two towns, then the clerk will submit to the state board that the vote did pass, and the state board will then issue a certificate of withdrawal for those schools. And that certificate of withdrawal essentially makes those two towns, it goes back so that they then will have a legally liable school district. So there then would be the school district of Francistown and the school district of Dublin. They would then hold a special meeting to elect a school board for each of those two towns and to raise and appropriate funds to go forward with school districts in those two towns. Pardon me? Yes, it should be 25. Correct. They then, during that period of time, from the vote, once the two towns, once the school districts are actually legal, liable school districts, they then will engage in planning up until July 1st of 2026, when they then would officially be withdrawn from the school district and go forward with their own school districts. Up until then, they would still be planning, but they would be part of the Conval School District. At this point in time, we'll turn things over to Curtis, and he'll give you some more details.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Curtis Hamilton. I am the school board representative for my town of Greenfield. For the past 58 years, our 9 towns have partnered together to educate our children, facilitate their growth, and ensure our greater Monadnock region continues to thrive for the generations that follow us. The proposed withdrawal of 2 of our member towns will prove to be one of the most complex challenges our district has faced in over half a century. What I'd like to do this evening is prop open the door of withdrawal and shine a light on what we have learned about how the costs, services, and operations of our district will change in this different setting. Similar to the actual process of withdrawal, my explanation will be complex. The details and nuances will matter. But before we open the door, I'd like to reacquaint us with the cooperative district we are currently in. The Conval School Board is composed of 13 seats, with proportional representation from each of our district's towns. The board's functions include guiding, developing, and approving the district budget. We create and adopt policies. We approve and adopt the district's curriculum, as well as all co-curricular and athletics offerings. We hire and evaluate the superintendent. We negotiate and improve teacher and administrator contracts, salaries, and benefits. We ensure school buildings are maintained, and we plan for the district's future facilities needs. We allocate to and withdraw from all trust funds, and the board also sets the district's tuition rates. The SAU, or School Administrative Unit, oversees and implements all administrative functions for our district. Along with the board, they build and oversee the district budget. They handle all accounting, bookkeeping, and business functions. The SAU oversees all human resource activities within Conval relating to hiring and administering health and retirement benefits. They coordinate with the Department of Education and ensure our district is in compliance with state and federal regulations. They administer and coordinate all curriculum that the school board adopts. They oversee the maintenance and planned improvements to our facilities. The SAU administers all policies adopted by the board. They oversee and coordinate all special education services throughout Conval and also to every child needing these services who lives within our district's borders. As a cooperative district, we are able to create strong economies of scale by pooling our buying power, our resources, and our risk. Through our collective size, we are able to negotiate better rates and contracts for technology. Our district is able to purchase diesel, propane, and electricity well below market rates. The district's maintenance and facilities staff is largely in-house, which saves us from outsourcing jobs small and large, and also allows us to respond quickly to needs as they arise. Our transportation contract affords us the ability to provide our own fuel and avoid paying a premium to the contractor. We are able to combine routes, particularly late bus routes, to service multiple towns per bus. Perhaps the clearest way to see how our district is intertwined is to examine how we share staff and support services between our schools. In our elementary schools, programming for art, music, library, and health and physical education is conducted by teachers who rotate between and serve multiple schools. For example, a school may only have 1 week of art programming per month. Sharing staff allows the district to hire these positions on a full-time basis, while ensuring all our elementary schools have access to these vital pieces of an early education. Nurses and school counselors also rotate. Special education staff, such as occupational therapists and speech therapists, school psychologists, frequently travel between schools to work with students on a need basis in conjunction with the student's IEP. By providing special education services ourselves, to every extent we can add consistency and familiarity to this delicate equation. Our large pool of teachers and staff allows the district flexibility at critical times when there is a prolonged vacancy due to difficulty hiring or a leave of absence. If a teacher is out sick, we have a pool of substitutes to fill in. The district's special education program also extends beyond our school year into the extended school year program, which is available to support all district towns. We provide special education services to the students in our towns that attend charter schools. Pre-K students with an IEP are also guaranteed educational services in our pre-K programs. The district's legal services could be discussed along any of the lines of these three categories. The cost and volatility of our legal obligations and outcomes is eased through sharing the risk. One of the greatest challenges our district faces is the rising cost and need of special education. Over $15 million, or 25% of our district budget, is devoted to servicing this mandated function of our public school. There are several aspects of these costs that make them volatile from a budgetary perspective. A single student requiring an out-of-district placement can cost the district well into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Special education transportation, as well as the educational services required, are often contracted out of district because they are beyond our means to meet. While contracting out services is extraordinarily expensive and at times unavoidable, we as a cooperative are able to collectively absorb these costs. To the degree we can, we are able to share and insulate each other against the high costs that arise in any one of our small towns. At first glance, you will notice the complexities of this new multi-district structure. The potential withdrawal of both towns would see the formation of 3 school districts, each overseen by SAU 1, and governed independently by 4 different boards. The Conval School District would comprise the towns of Antrim, Bennington, Greenfield, Hancock, Peterborough, Sharon, and Temple. These schools would be governed by the Conval School Board. The Francistown Independent School District would form a school board with 3 members overseeing their district and their elementary school. The Dublin Independent School District would also be overseen by a 3-member school board overseeing its district and elementary school. The Executive SAU Board would be responsible for governing the SAU. The procedure of weighted voting will all but guarantee that the proposed independent districts will have little to no influence over the composition and approval of the SAU's separate budget and the hiring of a superintendent. Once weighted voting is invoked, it gives each district a number of votes proportional to the number of students in their district. Specifically, each district will receive 1 vote for every 16 students. The total number of votes per district is then allocated proportionally to the board members of each respective district who are present. Using today's enrollment data, Conval would have 214 votes, and the independent districts would each have 18. The independent school districts will have to fully reinvent the wheel of public education. They will inherit all of the obligations and responsibilities associated with providing a free and appropriate public education open to every child within their district. They will oversee their own budget, and approval of this budget will fall to the voters of their town. They will be responsible for the cost of tuition for public school students attending middle and high school in another district. The cost of special education for all students within their borders will be theirs alone. They will be responsible for either directly providing or contracting out all special education services. Each withdrawing town will inherit the added obligation of child find duties, which include identifying and developing an IEP by the time a child turns 3. Independent districts will inherit the cost and responsibility to contract and facilitate transportation for their students independently from Conval. To further operationalize their district, they will have to identify and adopt curriculum, hire teachers and staff, and a principal. They will have to draft, review, and adopt policies that govern their new district. This is no small task. Conval has 311 individual policies, most all of which are mandated by state and federal law. The maintenance and operation of their facilities will be theirs to directly service or contract out. They will independently plan for the future of their school buildings and petition bonds for major improvements directly from their towns. They will be required to implement a food service program to provide meals for all of their students, and this will call for renovations to the kitchens at DCS and FES. They will also require independent and ongoing legal services with exceptional upfront costs to negotiate withdrawal issues around the dispensation of property and trust funds, the negotiation of tuition agreements, the implementation of policy, and the creation of contracts covering staff, transportation, and special education. At the heart of the Kentucky Valley Cooperative School District is each of our member towns' ownership of our schools. Ownership holds a guarantee that every child within our towns will receive an education overseen by our schools. Withdrawal, by nature, is a relinquishing of this ownership and this guarantee. For the past 58 years, there has been no doubt as to where middle and high school students will be educated within our 9 towns. If withdrawal passes, the task of negotiating tuition agreements will fall to the next board and the boards of the other districts. In this and every subsequent negotiation in the decades that follow, the basic question of where will Dublin and Francistown's children attend middle and high school will be at stake. Both towns have publicly stated that it is their intention to tuition their students back to Conval. Both towns have publicly stated that it is their intention to send their students back to Conval. However, their own withdrawal plans acknowledge that they are in ongoing talks with other area schools should future boards fail to agree to terms. There are other seismic changes that withdrawal would impose. Many teachers and staff at DCS and FES would no longer belong to the CVEA, which is the Conval Teachers Union. DCS and FES have a number of teaching and staff positions that are shared and will rotate between other Conval schools, including art, music, health and phys ed, library, school counseling, and the school nurse. Some have full-time equivalents of 0.17, 0.2, or 0.3. This means they serve DCS and FES on an average 1 day per week or 1 week per month. Post-withdrawal, it will be the independent district's responsibility to hire these positions and provide this programming. The remaining Conval district would not have the luxury of maintaining the status quo and contract these positions back unless it was in their best interest to do so. Alternative placement between Conval elementary schools would change. For example, a family who lives in Peterborough and wants their child to attend DCS can currently do so with board approval. This goes both ways. Elementary school students in Dublin and Francistown who attend other district elementary schools would next be subject to tuition negotiations and availability. Similarly, Conval pre-K programs would be dedicated to the residents of the remaining Conval district. Independent districts will lose their board representation in the middle and high schools. Without representation, the town will no longer have a voice or a vote on issues central to the quality, cost, and future direction for over half of their children's education. They will have no say in the Conval district budget. They will have no say in the negotiations for our teacher and administrator contracts. They will have no say in the adoption of middle school and high school curriculum, the co-curricular and athletic offerings, and the adoption of policies, the disciplinary review process, and the future planning of Conval's facilities. No tuition agreement will recover this representation, oversight, and ability to advocate with a vote. Financially, withdrawal will be both less efficient and more expensive for the SAU and the remaining Conval towns. In every scenario we can anticipate, taxes will go up. While the exact costs of withdrawal will only be known should it take effect. We have done our best to estimate these effects. When the withdrawal study began, we decided to base our analysis on a snapshot in time. We used the current fiscal year 24-25 budget as a baseline for breaking apart the district and seeing where the pieces land. In order to manage 3 districts as opposed to 1, our SAU will need more staff, and this means more spending. Post-withdrawal, we estimate SAU costs increasing by a minimum of $321,310. Not $1 of this new spending will see its way into a classroom. Many of the SAU's most important functions, such as accounting, payroll, reporting, and budgeting, would need to be duplicated or triplicated. At the very least, we estimate that it will require the addition of 2 full-time, well-qualified additions to the business office. Presently, we are in our region in an extraordinarily difficult time for hiring. There is no guarantee that the minimum of these 2 additional employees are even out there to be hired. Further, a multi-district structure would also create competition amongst our districts for hiring at every level. On a human scale, within the day-to-day operations, the burden that withdrawal and the multi-district structure would place on our SAU cannot be overstated. It will draw their focus further away from our students to the detriment of their education experiences and outcomes. Without Dublin and Francistown, the cost for each of the remaining Conval towns will increase, as they will be subject to a larger portion or allocation of the district's costs. In other words, they will have a larger piece of a smaller pie. A withdrawal of either town would see a portion of Conval's costs decline. The operation and maintenance of that school's building, the salaries and benefits of its staff, the cost and transportation of their students, the cost of special education services will be transferred to the withdrawing district. This reduction in cost will be offset by the loss of revenue, as the withdrawing town students will no longer be a part of Conval. For our estimates, we have removed the known costs of operating DCS and FES from the 24-25 budget, and we have replaced the revenue with a tuition scenario. Tuition is the largest variable in play in our estimation of the costs of withdrawal for a few reasons. First, the actual tuition rate will not be set until after withdrawal is voted on. Second, we have no guarantee of how many students each town will decide to tuition back. Since the withdrawal study began, we have held an estimation of tuition constant at Conval's cost per student for the elementary, middle, and high schools. This tuition cost estimate was based on a relevant DOE calculation tied to data available at the time our withdrawal study began. This estimate assumes that both towns withdraw and tuition all of their students back to Conval. It is both a base case assumption we must make and a best case scenario. The remaining Conval towns would see a tax increase of between 6.13% and 7.35% as an estimate. If fewer students tuition in, the ripple effect of that loss of revenue would be substantial. In the event that both towns withdraw and no students tuition back to Conval, the loss of revenue would trigger a much larger tax increase. This would be a worst case scenario. In this hypothetical, Conval would have to look at right sizing that would reflect the loss of all of the students of from these towns. And that right sizing would cover 200 students. And it's not in that number, and I want to be clear about that. So this is above and beyond, let me be explicit, it's above and beyond what that cost would be in a no tuition student scenario. But it paints the picture of one road down this path. Withdrawal fails to address any of the significant challenges that the remaining Conval towns face today. It will serve only to compound them. Just as withdrawal would draw the focus of our SAU away from students, it would preoccupy the board's attention for the foreseeable future. The board's intentions of focusing on the challenges facing our entire district will be taken over by addressing this fallout. We will not be providing estimates of what it will cost Dublin and Francistown to operate independently. We will, however, put forward thoughts and questions that should be in the forefront of everyone's mind. In the last 8 months of researching withdrawal efforts throughout New Hampshire, I have yet to find one instance of withdrawal proving to be less expensive for either party. The cost estimates put forward by both Dublin and Francistown are based on Conval's budget and inherit Conval's economies of scale. Have Dublin and Francistown adequately accounted for their costs when these economies of scale are lost? Special education costs total roughly 25% of Conval's current budget. Do Dublin and Francistown's estimates reflect this reality? And have Dublin and Francistown accounted for the cost, quality, and their preparedness to provide special education services to their preschool population? Francistown has indicated they would establish their own pre-K program. I didn't see an estimate for it in their budget. Have Dublin and Francistown adequately accounted for the additional cost and their ability to find and hire the many currently shared positions in their elementary schools? Have Dublin and Francistown accounted for the need to seed and maintain trust funds covering inevitable budget volatility around special education, building and maintenance, healthcare, and tuition? How do you expect the relinquishing of board representation to improve the quality of education in the middle and high schools for the students of your town? The estimates for legal expenses published in the minority reports and withdrawal plans were $7,300 in Francistown and $9,000 in Dublin. Lawyers can make $450 an hour. How is this a reasonable accounting of your costs? Should the operation of an independent district prove more expensive, would your town's voters continue to support your school? The current Conval AOA requires a supermajority vote to be amended. We saw last year that this requirement provides substantial protections to our small schools. As an independent district, what protections will your town's voters set forth to ensure your elementary school remains open? Please start having this conversation. Should middle school grades be held back in the elementary schools, how will the delay in integration affect their education and socialization? And last, but most importantly, ask and discuss what is the plan to educate post-withdrawal. Should a multi-district SAU be created after our March 11th vote, the option to withdraw from the SAU will be available to each of the new districts, including the Conval district. It is ultimately a decision that a board could bring to the voters of each district. We've heard from the Francistown School Committee that they've indicated Francistown intends on withdrawing from the SAU should their town withdrawal pass in March. Again, withdrawing from the SAU will be the decision of the voters of Francistown, not of a committee or of a select board. What gives us pause is the fact that Francistown's withdrawal plan did not include a budget or a plan for withdrawing from the SAU and operating their own. The voters have yet to be informed of the costs and many obstacles inherent to running an independent SAU. Mason is often cited as an example of a small school managed by its own SAU. Francistown included a copy of Mason's annual report within their own minority report. To run their SAU and school in Mason, I counted 15 additional staff members, not including grade level teachers, compared to Francistown's proposal. We do not presently have the liberty of assuming the voters of Francistown have a blank check to support their claims of cost neutrality or desire for total independence. We must simply consider the outcome that they withdraw and choose to remain within our SAU. Post-withdrawal, if the Conval district, the future Conval district, and that future board decides that the added administrative expense and operational burden of a joint SAU be against its best interest, it too could withdraw and reform as a new cooperative. If this came about, the Dublin and Francistown independent districts would need to provide their own SAU services. Both towns began pursuing withdrawal when the fate of their elementary schools hung in the balance of last year's consolidation vote. In that moment, I truly see how it made sense for them to study a path to keep their school. But today, Dublin Consolidated School remains open, and Francistown Elementary School remains open. And the Conval School Board has gone on record in saying that this vote will be respected and honored, and I do here as well. Withdrawal may or may not solve the issues of Dublin or Francistown. It would certainly bring them new challenges, and they will also inherit many of the same challenges we as a Conval district face today. Withdrawal does not address the challenges currently facing Antrim, Bennington, Greenfield, Hancock, Peterborough, Sharon, and Temple. It will only compound them. For these remaining Conval towns, it is safe to assume that vital efficiencies in our district will be lost, costs and taxes will increase, and no benefit will be gained for the students at Conval. A majority of our board believes that the era of cooperation is not behind us. A majority of our board believes that we are stronger together. This is hard. I'm just going to go over this voting language one more time and then open it up for conversation. I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and those of you who are watching online or watching at a later date. Your attention to the difficult issues we are grappling with means the world. So thank you. So district-wide and Dublin-wide, 50% vote required to pass. If 60% of Dublin voters vote to withdraw, the article will pass, unless 60% of the district-wide vote is no. District-wide and Francistown-wide, 50% vote required to pass. If 60% of Francistown voters vote to withdraw, the article will pass, unless 60% of the district-wide vote is no. Thank you.
We have time for questions and answers. We're going to have questions from our online audience, and we also have a microphone here for the people here. When you step up to the mic, please state your name and what town you're from, and limit yourself to 2 minutes. The questions can refer to any of the presentations you heard tonight. I invite all the speakers to come back up to be available to answer any and all the questions we may get. Janine, how am I going to get the questions? Okay.
Sorry. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Kevin.
My name is Kevin Pobst. I'm from Francistown, and I thought maybe I should lead off with a bit of rebuttal. And I try to express myself with as much respect as I can and as much respect as I feel for Dick and Jim, Curtis. I'm not always successful at selling that respect, but I want to say up front that I have great respect. I served on the board from 2020 to 2023, and I did 35 years as an administrator and a teacher in public education. So I have some background for what I'm talking about. Curtis and the Communications Committee and the board outlined a bunch of risks and challenges that Francistown and Dublin would be taking on were they to withdraw. And I just will presume positive intent that they were coaching us about the things that we needed and speaking to our voters about where the risks and where the fears should be. But Conval's board has a real weakness in their conversation about this, and that is their weakness is convalocentrism, which is that the Conval board is very familiar with how Conval does business, but they aren't necessarily familiar with how other districts do business, from the smallest districts to the largest districts. And so they're making a lot of assumptions about what Francistown would face were we to set up a one elementary school district and tuition our students into a middle school and high school program. We have done the research. And in fact, the reason why the State Board of Education chose our minority report over the majority report from the Conval feasibility study is that it was clear to them that we had done the research into what it would require us to do were we to set up an individual standalone district. And the reason we were able to do that research and the reason we're able to feel like we can be successful in standing up a one school district is that it's not a unicorn. This is not something that hasn't been done elsewhere in the state. And in fact, it's something that's been done in our region very successfully. Curtis made a reference to Mason, and Mason is a pretty good roadmap, but so is Cornish and several other districts. They present budgets that are extremely detailed. It's the benefit of having a tiny little school district is you can spell out employee by employee and what they're doing and who they're and what their overlap is with other employees and what their exact costs are. And so we have roadmaps available to us about how to do what we're asking to do. And imposing on it a set of questions that seem logical from Conval's perspective is not a fair assessment of the task ahead of us. And we believe that we have done enough research and know enough about what we would have to do to be able to address the challenges that you put forth. The research to address the myriad questions that a one-town district must address is not all that challenging because there are so many models to work from. And what we would be trying to do would not be a unicorn. Mason, for example, as you said, has been a standalone elementary district for 15 years. They provide a very detailed budget, how they deploy their staff, and they've successfully addressed the issues of spiking special education costs in any given year, pupil transportation, the ambidexterity of staff, and the real bogeyman that Conval wants us to fear, which is this SAU cost. Now, the Francistown School Committee cannot withdraw Francistown from the SAU. You're absolutely right about that. But we have every reason to believe that a new school board would take the advice of the Francistown School Committee and would withdraw from the SAU. And Curtis, though you may have counted 15 employees that you would draw a line to the SAU from, the superintendent in Mason draws a line from 3 employees, one of whom is part-time, to the SAU. Their SAU is run at the bare minimum of essential cost. And they do it for less than we currently contribute to the Conval district. They do the whole ball of wax for less than we contribute to the Conval district each year. So I'm trying to shorten this up so it's less than 2 minutes. So the bottom line for us is that Francistown is ready, if voters approve withdrawal, to stand up a very feasible school district following well-established models for doing so, and will save the Conval district from having to enlarge the SAU staff. And crucially, Francistown will take full responsibility for a school that Conval really hasn't wanted to operate for the last 20 years. And we'll take responsibility for that if our town votes for withdrawal. And there's my question. And I had to put a question mark on it. Isn't it clear that the withdrawal of Francistown can be a win-win for the 9 towns of the current Conval district?
Thank you. No. It's not clear. There's so much unknown about what's ahead and whether it's the tuition question and how many students come back and what any one of us does next. And that's not clear. The SAU costs increase the costs for the rest of the towns. I'm not going to repeat my entire presentation, but I've been at this for 8 months and it is patently, completely unclear. I view it as a lose-lose.
But that's over 5 minutes. So we want to make sure that people have time. I can time it, say we're at 2 minutes. I'll leave it up to the moderator how long we want to speak. They'll get in the audience and out of audience.
Fair point. Yes. Name and town, please.
Sure. My name's David Stalin from Francistown, and I'll be brief. I'm going to follow what Kevin discussed. There's a lot to consider here. I'm just going to talk about one aspect, the SAU. This can get confusing. It's in fact so confusing. If I'm not mistaken, Conval's own legal counsel issued an opinion on how withdrawal would affect SAU, and then later had to reverse that opinion. And so I think we've all learned throughout the feasibility study, it's been a learning process, but it's abundantly clear that a small town school district does not need SAU services from a large SAU with 18 employees. And Kevin already referenced Mason. They have 2.5 SAU employees. That's what we're looking at. The point isn't that it's going to save Francistown money. Sure, it would, but that's why we'd be so motivated to do it. That's why you can count on it. I would think the same would apply to Dublin. But the bigger point for everybody else, for the rest of the towns in the Conval district, should 1 or 2 towns withdraw, is there would be no change. There would be no multi-district SAU, and therefore no increased SAU costs. In fact, you would have a smaller district. I would think maybe you would be able to find more ways to cut costs. If not in year 1, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, this leaner district, you might find more opportunities.
I do appreciate the temperament and tone that the people of Francistown have brought to this incredibly difficult process.
You all set?
When you're discussing, I appreciate that it's the intention of the people who are working on this closely to consider the effects of the other towns, but it is not in front of us. It's a town-wide vote, and we must tell the people in the rest of the district that it's not a sure thing. So I thank you for the consideration, but when I look at Mason's staff, that was 15 people in addition to their teaching staff. Those were people that weren't in your budget. That's just a side by side. I know there's money there. I know you've allocated extra money in your budget for the SAU for that cost neutrality, but it's $380,000. To what extent? I raise it as things that people need to consider and that we need to discuss. Thanks.
Before we take our next question, do we have any online questions?
It's from Sophie Luxmore, and she says, I am curious if the salary decrease is due to firing teachers or not filling empty spots. And if teachers are being fired, how will that be determined? And I would guess this goes back to the budget, the decrease in staffing.
The decrease in staffing is coming from a few places. We do have some positions that have that during today as well as during budget season had not been filled. And so our concern when we were looking at the budget is it's not fiscally responsible for us to continue to carry positions that we're not able to fill. And we had been able to make do without them. So some positions were open positions that we did not carry through to this budget. Some of the positions that were eliminated based on student needs, so related to special education. So we have students that were working with the para, we knew that the para was not going to be needed. Fortunately, we also had some open para positions, so we'll be able to move people around. And then the final piece was looking at our class size guidelines. And we have some small classes, so we looked at right sizing our student to teacher ratio at the elementary level. And still at the elementary level, when we look at elementary classes and what we're planning for next year, 70% of our classes at the elementary level still fall below our class size guidelines, and the 30% fall within our class size guidelines.
I just wanted to add with terminology. Fired is when you are removed because you're not getting your job done. Reduction in force is when we can't afford to maintain the staffing we have. And that's what happened. Teachers weren't fired. There was a reduction in force. At the end of the day, you still lost your job, but there's a totally different reason why you did. So I just wanted to make that clear.
So I'm Carol Monroe, and I'm from Dublin. And so most of my, what I want to say has to do with more comments or rather than a direct question. So first of all, I am a select board member in Dublin, and this all came to a head last March. And I really felt strongly, not just me, the select board felt strongly, the town clearly made it clear that we needed to look at withdrawal. And I think it needed to go to the voters of Dublin. Dublin should decide if it's going to withdraw or not withdraw. And so we have looked at this really as a committee. We looked at it very closely. We've done the research that Francistown has done. Frankly, at $5.4 million, which is what we pay to the Conval School District to educate 140 students, we can certainly afford to do this. And all the numbers match up. So the numbers put forth that you all provided were part of that withdrawal plan. And I increased those numbers by 10%. Secondly, Dublin pays roughly $20,000. There's a gap between the lowest town and the highest town in the Conval School District. And Dublin pays about $20,000 more per student than the lowest town. Next, I want to point out that the average, Dublin still pays about $10,000 to $12,000 more than the average in the Conval School District. What we are paying to educate between 135 and 140 students, we can afford to do this. That isn't a question, it is completely feasible. You raise a number of questions that you and I can't answer because they require a negotiation. And that won't begin until after the vote is done. But we're not concerned about whether it's fiscally possible to do this. I'd like to also add that this, I'll wrap it up. The slides presented tonight were not presented to the feasibility study committee. So any numbers that were put forth tonight have come up since then and have not been shared publicly. So it's possible that they might be lower or higher than what we put in our budgets, but we've asked for those numbers, and this is the first time we're seeing them. Part of this is that Conval School District, or SAU-1, is unfamiliar with being a multi-district SAU. But maybe it's an opportunity for the SAU-1 and the Conval School District to embrace it. Because if you're reading the papers lately, you know there are many towns looking at their relationship to a cooperative school district and wanting to make changes. If you were a multi-district SAU, then you could absorb even more towns in the SAU and therefore divide the costs across other towns if you wanted to do that. There are many examples. This is not rocket science. You see it, SAU 29 has like 10 towns that have some variation of a partnership with them, 10 districts. Harrisville in our backyard does this. It's not impossible, and it is feasible. And so that's the way I'll leave it for all of you and the Dublin voters is it's possible and it's feasible for us to do this. If that's what they want, they'll need to come and vote.
Carol, I'd like to address one of your comments about the model, about the cost. Same model, same inputs. There's one change to the model. And a week or so ago, just to fill everybody in, a week ago Friday, and I think Charlie Pyle, you guys have the model because they asked for it. And it's not quite ready to go. If you found the mistakes, there's some references to other parts that might not work. But on my computer it works because everything on my laptop, right? But one mistake we found, we sat down a week ago, Friday, 2 weeks ago. 3 or 4 of us, Jim Kingston, myself, Curtis, and Ann spent 4 or 5 hours trying to go through the numbers, trying to get the best numbers we could in terms of what are going to be the shared costs. So the model, the numbers we had tonight are the exact same numbers that you saw that in terms of taking Francistown out of Conval. We took the SAU costs off the top. The only change was we found a mistake in my calculation in the model. You go through, you're probably familiar with this SAU page. The staff forgot to add the benefits. So it's short the $300,000. No, it wasn't short $300,000. It was short a difference yeah. But if you do if you correct the mistake, and I was concerned because Ann was presenting her take at the SAU cost. Brian Cisneros, a former business manager, took the SAU cost and built them up. He said, we need some of these. They transfer them over. I believe Ann can speak to it. We plan on doing this eventually because we just haven't had time the last 2 weeks. She took the SAU costs and started taking things out, and Jim and Curtis and I stood there as Ann went through the model. We said, okay, you take that out, take that out, take that out. You come up with the number. There's a difference. I said, what the hell is the difference? We couldn't understand it because it looked like the same things. That's where I found my error in copying the model. You're going to get model version 3.05, whatever the hell. It sounds fancy, but it's just another copy of the spreadsheet. You'll see those numbers. Those numbers came right out of the same model you'll have. I'll get the model to you tomorrow morning. The model included both years. I told everybody in the feasibility study. We started, Brian did his numbers in 1 year. I included, anybody who's seen the model, anybody who's here to speak, it has both years in it. In fact, what you're gonna see when you get it out, it's got next year's numbers in there too. So one result of doing this model is all the selectmen and all the towns will be able to see the model. Once we go through this every year, you'll be predict fairly close to what your tax is gonna be. 'Cause I've uploaded the model with all the ADM and everything. It's a useful model. This district is complex because of the way the budget is allocated. And I think somebody just referred to it, maybe you, Carol. The model will allow you to take the 50-50 formula, change 2 cells, and it'll recalculate. You can see exactly what happens to your taxes if you change the op plan, if you change anything. It's gonna be a nice tool for everybody to use to keep an eye on us. So the numbers didn't change from the model except that one number, the SAU cost. That is not what's gonna drive everything.
Hello again. I'm John Marcinkus from Peterborough, and I am very intrigued and fascinated by the Dublin Francistown matter. I was incredibly troubled, though, by Curtis, your presentation. But it brought back such a strong, painful memory. 1999, I was working for a major high-tech corporation, and I was doing business with many other high-tech corporations who we all faced the inevitable year 2000 crisis that was going to shut down all of our computers, all of our technology, everything that was plugged into the internet that was a computer was going to fail. You probably all remember that. It was incredibly painful, stressful. And as we approached that last week, we all had Monday off, those of us who weren't required to work. But on Tuesday, January 2nd, 2000, we came into work, turned our computers on, and nothing happened. All the detail, the finances, the horror stories we had heard leading up to that date, and nothing happened. But my point and my question is, based on New Hampshire, live free or die, who are we to deny Dublin and Francistown what they want? They have a right. And if this is what they want and they get the votes, they should have what they want.
I agree with that. I can speak for my fellow, there were 2 people from each of the 9 towns on the feasibility committee. A board member, and most towns, they only had 1 board member, and a selectman. And I think you look at the records, both Chet Bowles and myself voted in favor of you guys doing your own thing. Not you guys, but Francistown and Dublin doing their own thing, because we wanted the voters to decide. But we're up here, and I voted for you guys moving forward. I did not agree with it. I think it's neither feasible. It might be financially feasible for you guys, but I just don't think it's going to work out for everybody in the end. But I wanted to give the voters to say, not the board to decide.
But it might. What I saw up there was negative.
It's real.
It may be, and that's what I remember from 1999. It was so real. In any case, thank you.
I'd like to add that it is absolutely the right to engage in this process. But I'm a representative for another town in this cooperative, and I have an absolute duty to present to them every facet that could unfold from this process and to let it know what it means to them as well. We're in a cooperative district. This is where we are, and this is part of the process, and we can't ignore the effects, any of the potential effects. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Laura Maffera of Francistown, and I'm part of the Francistown School Committee. And I just wanted to talk a little bit of some more reasoning of why we are looking to what we're doing, which is local control. And I think everybody, a little bit of what he was saying. You talked about maybe right-sizing some of the classes. Some of our schools in Francistown, we appreciate our small class sizes and don't necessarily want to go to smaller class sizes. With local control, our school, our town would have the ability to make that choice for ourselves rather than someone else making that choice for us. As far as representation, yes, we would lose representation on the Conval School Board, but we would have total representation over our elementary schools and the ability to do some negotiation. Obviously, we're not going to negotiate everything that we want, but we do have some say in that. But we would at least have complete say over our town and our school that we have. And we would have the ability, you asked Curtis, what would allow us to keep our school? We would have local control. Our town would say whether we want to close our school or not, rather than the rest of the district voting to close our school. So that is one thing that we have in our pocket that we have the support for. It's local control.
Hi, my name is Nicole, and I'm a parent in Peterborough. My daughter's a fourth grader at PES, and she loves it. So I know all of the hard work that you all are putting into her experience at PES, and I sincerely appreciate it. So I have a couple of comments first, and then I want to follow up just with a question. So one of the reasons why I came to this meeting was because of the drastic increase in my property taxes since we moved in. We moved in from Oregon in 2019, and our property taxes have gone up $8,000 since we moved in. And this presentation, kind of opened my eyes to what it could be potentially if this were to happen with Francistown and Dublin withdrawing from the school district. Could become exponentially worse in several years. So that's a huge concern of mine. Throughout this research, one of our neighbors mentioned, potentially looking into other districts to pull in additional schools to offset the cost of Dublin and Francistown withdrawing. Has that been looked into?
No.
Will it be?
Well, I'll give you a personal example. As chairman of the Budget and Property Committee, the start of every year, the last 3 or 4 years, the first meeting I've asked everybody, what kind of ideas can we look at? Last year I said, after the vote, says we can't put any new thought on the plate. We're going to be overwhelmed. The SAU staff was overwhelmed. Kimberly was here. You heard how Kimberly said it. It's just this last year has been overwhelming. We have lots of ideas. We're going to probably, if my fellow board members agree, we'll have an open forum and bring in your ideas. We'll write them down. We'll go, maybe not discuss them, debate them, but we'll write them all down. We'll look at them. There's a lot of ideas out there. I've got a lot of ideas. We just haven't had the bandwidth to do it.
Hi, Rob Walling from Greenfield. Question about the healthcare increase with the drop in headcount. Why is that continually going up? It was 25% last year, 15% this year. What is the main driver there?
Because if any member or employees of the district, raise your hand. Their individual premiums went up 25%.
Where are you getting the insurance from?
We don't have many choices.
Can this not be
We have
negotiated?
we have two choices, and the union has a say in which provider they use. And we try to introduce that, and they're not here to speak for their side of the equation, but one of the things we put in there was a lower cost policy, for a lot of kids. When I was younger, I said, I don't need no stinking health insurance right now. I know I need it, right? You see my hand shaking.
but
Kevin knows. Kevin and I have the same
My
problem.
policies have not gone up, 35%.
We are stuck with our provider, and they hit us with a 25%. Read the paper. Every town and school district that I've seen, all cites healthcare costs, healthcare costs, healthcare costs.
Mm-hmm. But why are we stuck with those providers? Can we not?
There's not many that service, and we have to negotiate the change with the union.
Is that something we're looking at for the
I
future?
thought I just said we were.
Okay.
We could put this chart back up there. We do have the option to introduce somebody else.
Someone
Another-
per
an
provider
alternate supplier.
a different plan? Because it seems like these providers not really working out so well.
There's two providers with multiple plans.
Okay, so
And I believe, again, I'm not speaking for the union because I didn't sit in, but we did bring in the other supplier and the union sat down and said, we don't want anything to do with them. They evaluated their own circumstances against the policies. They said, this is a better one for us.
but are we looking past for, you know, additional providers as well?
Yeah, it's,
Okay.
currently it's in the collective bargaining agreement. The actual provider is in the agreement. So for us to change, it has to be a negotiated item.
Okay.
And so we have brought in other healthcares to present to staff, to compare, and we're still with the same provider right now.
Okay.
But we are looking into that. We
Thank
have
you.
looked into that.
And we've shifted premium costs. We're increasing the share that the staff cover. Like I mentioned, it was 88% not that long ago. Now it's that we covered. Now we're down to 82.5%. So we're offering that other premium that's cheaper and cheaper for the staff member and also cheaper for the school district. So we're working on it, is the answer.
Janine, do you want to go? Oh, okay. Well, I got a quick one. So I saw at the end of the presentation on budget, it looked like we were going to have a little bit of surplus at the end of last year. I was just wondering, going back, when's the last time the district was faced with a budget shortfall at the end of the year? Pat Troy, Francistown,
We
sorry.
can't have one.
Or have you ever ended up with one where you can't allocate any funds to the trust funds and you're out of juice at the end of the year? I mean, this year, right? So you finished, you allocated appropriate funds to the trust funds as a responsible district would, and then you're left over with an additional 500,000 at the end of the year. Have we ever been in a position where we've been kind of had nothing left in the well?
I actually have the numbers over there if you want to get, I can grab them, but every year that I went back about 7 or 8 or 9 years, like Janine did, any annual report I have, and I got about 10 of them in a nice little pile at the desk. I can go through and calculate, you know, the money, you can figure out how much money we spent versus the budget by looking at three things. How much do we put in the trust funds? How much do we return to the taxpayers? And how much do we retain? There's only 3 years we retain money. The government gave us authority, emergency order in COVID, retain money, we did. We gave back 250 because that's what I think we gave back 250 because we put in the budget. And then last year we retained $1 million, and I think this year only 600. But the amount we have available is getting smaller because we're tightening up the budget. We're scrubbing it, and it started 7 or 8 years ago. It's my time here. You can see the numbers going down. I wanted to put that story together, just didn't have time with everything the last couple of weeks. But I will be putting that together.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Elian Laramie from Francistown. I see you speaking about how you care about your school in the district, but the board has consistently several times tried to close our school. The consolidation would have closed the school. Our town and Dublin have both laid out a very clear plan and a budget on how they can move forward, and the state agreed with that. Where there's a school district with Conval that has repeatedly tried to close our school, what would be our motivation to vote to stay in the district? It was said that, future boards or this board would not try to close the school again. But what if a future board decided to do that?
Just to clarify, historically, the school board has tried to reconsolidate once. Okay, every other time that consolidation was looked at, it was started by a warrant article that was submitted by people within the district, as the warrant article that we have tonight was. So that that keeps being repeated, that the board keeps trying to close schools, is not inaccurate.
There's only one time that closing the schools
forward to voters. My years hasn't been discussed many times yet. The only time. The only time to close schools brought to the voters was one time. It's been talked about many times, absolutely. But the only time it was brought to the voters was this one time. So just to be clear, and you're right, future boards can decide whatever they want to do. But I think boards are wise enough to look at the vote to say clearly, this board was told what the voters in this district want. I think it would be foolish for future boards to not look at that seriously. But again, only one time was it brought to the voters to make this decision. The board has never brought it forward other than the discussions that may have happened. So I hear your concern, and you're right about future people could, but only one time was it brought to the voters.
Yes, but if those discussions keep on happening and it seems as though it could happen,
Right.
what would be the motive? Like,
but-
why wouldn't Francis
Sure,
Town have
but the
a
discussion
reason?
is outside the board. It wasn't within the board. That discussion was brought to the board for that discussion, but it wasn't initiated by the board. So there's the difference. And, you know, of course, no one has control over what people can bring forward. And yes, could a board do that in the future? Absolutely right. But I would also think that they would clearly see where the voters stood on doing that. So, but you're right, there's no guarantee, but it would be pretty unlikely. And again, when you look at the number of votes necessary to make that happen, it's pretty tough to get to change the Articles of Agreement. So, but I do hear you, and you're right about your concern.
Hi, Stephanie Hurley from Peterborough. I have a question. I have a couple of things to say, but I have a question about the actual warrant. The part about 60% of, I think it's 60% of the people in the towns, not including Dublin and Francistown, unless 60% of the district-wide vote is no. And my concern is that, I mean, if they vote 60% to withdraw, I think they should be able to withdraw. I wonder why that was put in there.
That's by law. That's in the New
State
Hampshire.
law.
Yep, New Hampshire legal statutes.
Okay, so so for me, what that says is that since I respect Dublin and Francistown's right to withdraw from the district if they aren't happy being in the district, then I would encourage voters in the rest of us to vote yes, so that we can let them go if they want to go, and leave it up to them. I am, it brings up that issue of cost, that it sounds like you were saying that the cost for the rest of the people who are left, the district that's left, is going to go up because of their leaving, that they will cost us money. And what I want to know is, for example, if they decide to leave and it's going to cost us more, is that because they're going to be tuitioning their students in? Is that why it's going to cost us more, that they won't pay enough to cover the costs of their students coming in here? I don't really understand why it's going to cost us more for us to lose them. And, you know, I just think if they want to leave, they should be able to leave.
And
So-
I appreciate that, but the same, maybe your husband, maybe your neighbor once says, oh, why do my taxes keep going up? The numbers we showed today are the impact on us, not us, on the remaining towns, but Sharon will be one of the remaining towns, and on the multi-district. I'm pretty confident in how the SAU costs are going to be. We took the rest of the costs, and all we took out of there was what we know, and Carol and everybody else on the feasibility committee know is going to come out. These are low volume. These are conservative numbers. coming up with the numbers is complex because there's 9 towns. Who goes out, the different amount of taxes coming in, it's a complex spreadsheet. My head almost exploded yesterday when this guy over here asked me, what if you combine withdrawal and the budget cap? I said, I can't do that. I need a Manhattan. But no,
Okay.
believe, and anybody who wants to go sit through it, we can walk you through it and maybe another night, the numbers that he put up there. When I send this spreadsheet out, I'll leave a scenario with these numbers in there.
Well, just one thing that occurs to me is if the costs are going up for us because they've left, then why would we tuition them in and not charge them the additional money to make up for some of that lost cost? In the tuitioning in, couldn't we take that into account and for the high school and middle school?
Yeah, were you at the deliberative session the other day?
No.
Last week?
No.
The budget cap was proposed at 29,000. I suggested 59,000 per student. That was my opening shot in our negotiation. I kind of set the stake out here, right? I don't know what's going to happen. We don't know. Anybody
So
thought about it?
the cost per student is not really realistically what it costs.
The cost per student is, these are our costs for students. Just crunch the numbers. What do we pay? How many students? Easy math.
So that would be how you would figure
That's
out the
what we have.
cost of
That's
tuition
the
then.
number we have in the model. Where we're going to end up? I don't know where we're going to end up.
Okay, okay.
I
Thank
don't know
you.
who's going to be at the table.
Well, since Jim used my name in the calculation of the numbers, I thought I deserved the opportunity to speak. I'm Jim Kingston from Temple. I'm our school board representative from Temple. And I am part of the minority on this issue from the board. I did vote in favor of bringing the withdrawal proposals from Dublin and Francistown forward. I encourage everyone to go out and read the majority report and the minority report. I think it will show which one has the most detail, the most thought into them. As far as the numbers that were put up here tonight, Jim's right. The SAU number is the only one that we have good confidence in. Any number beyond that is a guesstimate based on future negotiation. We're also a $60 million ton aircraft carrier that's hard to turn. And as a result of that, we may well see that tax increase that Jim showed for the small towns, the remaining towns, that first year. But it's also potential to use this as a forcing function to crank the rudder over on that aircraft carrier and do something different. So to say that there are continuing into the future tax raises for the remaining towns, I think that's scare factor. Thank you.
Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, John. Just going to point to the other side of what if we raised the tuition. And negotiations, I do hope, should they happen, they be held in good faith. But when you raise the tuition, say $3,000, that affects the viability of the independent districts. If you put the tuition at $29,000, Dublin's cost would go up $400,000. Francistown's would go up a lot too. So the budgets that they've set forth would be less realistic. And that's where the complexities of the negotiations would be.
John Wood from Dublin. I'm sorry for being the last person. I was driving from Boston Logan back here to try to make it in time.
Don't worry.
All right. So, there's a joke, 88% of statistics are made up on the spot, right? So I work in IT sales. I work for a multi-billion-dollar worldwide global software company, and I can make numbers look perfect for the client or not perfect for the client. So one of my concerns is going back not to the withdrawal vote, but to the presentation that the chairman gave on the budget cap. Whether I'm put for it or not, I think it's a little barnstorming to show doom and gloom on something as I was driving from Boston, listening to the conversation, right? There's no conversation in any of the school board meetings that I've heard thus far about consolidating middle schools, putting 7th and 8th grade at the high school, and consolidating both middle schools, and other finding efficiencies that could easily be done or started to look at before we start going into the world is ending. Someone said Y2K earlier, right? I think that there's a number of factors and features here that the board failed to address over the past year, saying, oh, well, we're waiting for the withdrawal thing to happen. Potentially, had you done that work over the past year, Dublin and Francistown would have maybe decided, you know what, it's not feasible. The last thing I want to point out is, yes, the board has said they won't close elementary schools. However, you cannot prevent an independent voter creating a petition warrant article to modify the articles of agreement, just like the budget cap is a petition warrant article, which means any citizen could close 4 elementary schools that fast, okay? And you can say agree or disagree, and the vote is the vote. So I don't hold a lot of weight on the board won't do something. This board, the next board is not beholden to what you say. They can do whatever they want, and the next board after that and after that. So I want voters to understand it's only good until March 12th, and then it resets the clock. Thank you.
I just want to point out that to amend the Articles of Agreement requires a 67% vote, which I'm not sure that any warrant has ever gotten 67% of the vote. It's a extremely high hurdle to overcome. So yes, anyone could petition and put that on as a petition warrant, but it's a extremely high voter number to hit. And like I said, I'm not sure that any warrant has ever hit that number.
The funding formula
Yeah.
has Dublin paying more
Yeah.
now than it did before,
Yeah.
so that we had fairness across the district.
Well,
Was
well,
one of those-
well, that's, I don't know how that relates to what I'm saying.
No, that's-
This is just a quick fact check there. Go ahead.
Thanks. I'm just going to speak to John's comments really quick. John, should you and I have the opportunity to serve on this board next year, I very much look forward to doing the work you mentioned with you, should we have the time. I think you're going to be stunned by how much time it takes to do what's been in front of us and what could potentially be in front of us. We have lives outside of being board members. I run a business. I have 2 young children, and yet I still have found 40 hours a week to do this. And I haven't had the opportunity yet to get to those questions, and I would very much like to. So thanks.
This is just a quick fact check. I went through all the annual reports of the school district from 1968 onward, and I found 8 instances where there was an attempt to change shall to may, or the equivalent of that, with respect to the elementary schools. 4 of them were by petition article, but 4 of them were the initiatives of school boards.
Hi, Mary Murphy. I'm the state representative for Francistown and Deering, Hillsborough 27. And I just wanted to, I'm just coming up to speed on all of this stuff because I'm on Ways and Means. So we're busy getting inundated with agency forecasts in terms of what they want to spend in the coming year. And so we're trying to hold the line on what the state is spending in general, just to make sure that you're not further burdened by additional state taxes. My understanding was that why the SAU was seeking to close Francistown and possibly Dublin was due to lack of enrollment. It became uneconomic to provide that facility. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you look at the numbers, Ann could cite the numbers, pupils per building.
Okay.
But I was in business too. My only education experience is having my butt in a classroom seat, right? But you look at our equation versus the business I came from. There we could improve the bottom line by getting prices up, more value for a product, deliver more value for the product at less cost. We could look at buildings, we could look at people. Here we can look at buildings and we can look at people. We try to look at buildings, you said, leave my buildings alone. We gotta look at people. We can't do much without about the price of people. We can look at the number of people, and we're limited what we can do.
Right, no, I understand that. So why I asked that question is that there are a number of bills that are coming through the gauntlet of the state that might make it possible to tuition students in from outside of your SAU and also the district into Francistown Elementary, which is an outperforming elementary school. So for me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to close like your outperforming elementary school if we can use like the EFA or some other solution to tuition children in from districts where they are unhappy. And that way you're making those parents happy in that district, and you're going to make Francistown happy, and these other towns will be happy because they won't necessarily have to have Francistown and Dublin withdraw. So that's something that's in the works. The Republicans have a working majority in the House on all committees, a supermajority in the Senate, and the governorship. And I think that if and they're hell bent for leather, going to try and make it, put the control back in the hands of the parents and let the parents figure out, okay, I like this school better. I think my child will do better there, and we're going to let them move. And so it doesn't matter what district they're in today, they're going to be able to move.
So you're going to encourage the governor to stop blocking the Superior Court's decision?
I think
Supreme
that
Court
they're
decision?
working on solutions to deal with the funding issues as well. It's a huge number of bills that are coming through that are focused explicitly on solving the education funding problem as well, because we recognize that there are towns, a couple of the towns here spoke previously about how, gee, I'm spending this much more. I mean, Deering has the same problem. They're spending a lot more than other towns within their SAU. So the state's very aware that this is a problem, and it's being worked as I speak. I don't know whether these bills will pass or not, but they, if the Republicans get behind it, there's a very strong chance that they will.
This last year has been a tough year. I think Johnny made a comment about all this gloom and doom. We're facing the bomb right now. We got, as far as we're concerned, we got 3 bombs on the warrant. We got the cap bomb, we got the 2, and they're real. The numbers are real. The impact on us are real. Anybody who's looked at use my feasibility model, it does the job. It gives you the ability to put your own numbers in and predict the results. We put our numbers in, and we've shared our numbers exactly. So I don't know what to tell you. I will make a comment that I think Dick misspoke when he presented the 2 scenarios on the cap. That was a range. That wasn't first year, second year. It was a range. Like, I'm more than willing to share where those numbers came from if everybody wants to hear it.
Hold on one second. I'm going to respond to, you referenced, I believe, what is Senate Bill 101 that was introduced by State Senator Lang that is proposing school choice to parents and families across New Hampshire, where they can send their children to any high school throughout the state. We need to consider who that applies to. Is every family capable of driving their student to a better performing school? Or do just the students who are advantaged, who come from families of means, have that opportunity? And what is left?
Well,
I'm not done.
Yeah,
I'm
okay,
not done.
go ahead.
And what is left behind when the families of means congregate at public schools that they deem to be better? What is left behind for working class families, for families, 2 parents working a job, single mother? Their schools, it will make rural districts like ours suffer.
Well, I have to say, having spoken with the Deering parents, and Deering is spitting distance from Francistown, if I can solve Francistown's problem and Deering's problem, I'm happy with that. And I believe I spoke with other representatives, they're in the same boat in some of these other towns where there's one really outperforming school, there's another one that's not. These parents care so much about their children, honestly, they drive an hour if they had to, and I know parents who have done that. They've driven their kids down to Boston Latin every day. So I think it's we leave that to the parents. It's their choice, it's their tax dollars.
You leave it to the parents who can. You leave nothing to the parents who can't.
I have a quick question based on this conversation. I believe we tuition. Oh, hi, I'm Christy Green. I come from Dublin. I believe that we tuition students from other places but now currently. So some parent could tuition their child into Francistown, to Dublin, to any of the other schools. So that ability happens right now. It does. We have it. So anyway, I'm very happy that the school board has opened up this venue of communication. It's this kind of communication that hopefully will put the cooperation back into the school district again. I'm pleased that we have a legislator who has come, because really one of the things we are struggling in our district with so many issues. And one of the things that we have to look at is beyond our district and what is going on at the state. How is public education being squeezed? How is our money being spent? And now this is such a huge issue, and so much is happening right now. So please go forth and educate yourself about what is happening at the state level too. Just don't look at your school board to try to solve these problems, because it's not doable. It's just not doable at that level. And I just want to say that the closing of the 4 elementary schools, the proposed closing of the 4 elementary schools, was to address the clear financial difficulty that Conval is having. We still have it, whether Francistown and Dublin leave or not, we still have those same issues. So I plead for us to look at a consistent plan, and not just to try to make those changes piecemeal. Whether Dublin stays or goes, the district still needs to be able to look at how to address those issues in a consistent way, so that the taxpayers and the parents and the students can benefit from those changes. And thank you for all the hard work you do as school board members. I have some idea of what it's like. It's a thankless task, but you got to know in your heart that you're doing what's right for the students.
My name is Sandy King. I'm from Peterborough, and I have a question on the budget cap of $29,000. What is the actual cost today to educate a student in the Conval School District? And does that take into account the Lions Heart Charter School? Are they grouped in with the schools that you're showing here?
They're not grouped in. You asked a good question. I got a chart. I don't know if everyone wants to go through it, but I did an analysis of how we arrived at the pricing was arrived at, and to back up the numbers we show in the chart. If people are interested in the details, most people you'll fall asleep, but I'm willing to walk you through it. I don't know how to answer your question.
What is the actual cost? I guess if right now it's 26,000. Oh, okay, I see. And if the cap was at 29, would all those devastating effects take place in the future, or that's immediately?
That is a great question, because if you read the budget cap words, I got to say this carefully. The verbiage was engineered by your state legislature. They did a lousy job. There's a lot of ambiguity built in the model. Here's some basic questions. The language in the petition warrant article is specified by state law. You get to fill in a dollar amount. The language ties the dollar amount that's filled in by whoever wants to fill in the petition times a escalation factor, so that 29,000 a year would go up year by year by some index, consumer price index, which by the way is just updated at 9:30 this morning. I had my spreadsheet updated at 9:32, I guarantee you.
Yeah.
And the other index is students. Read the language, it says ADMR as of October 1st. What the hell does that mean? There is no ADM as of October 1st. ADM is at the end of the year. I can go in gory detail why this cap as written will not work. I can come up with 3 or 4 different numbers. And that's my model shows. That's why I got the range. It is going to have an impact in the first year. If any year it'll
The bottom line, the state calculated cost 26.
In our district or statewide? In our district, okay.
That is not our cost.
No, it's more, I just realized I had the answer in my hands and printed. What year do you want?
Well, now, because
I can make up a number, I can read, put my glasses on, and read the number.
I'm going to be voting on this in March, so what is it now?
Okay, so if you look at fiscal year, this is fiscal year 25, let's take this year's budget is, gross budget is $60.8 million divided by the beginning of the year enrollment. October 1st of this year was 1936. You do the math and it's 31,405.
Okay. And that
Okay.
does not include the Lionheart students?
No, not at all.
Are they a separate cost to us?
They're paid for by people who have a different political philosophy than a lot of people in this room do. Pardon? Some of it is. No, we don't provide transportation to them.
They have the ability to tap into our transportation, which they are not doing right now. But we do have the obligation still to make sure our students with disabilities are receiving the services that they that are required by their IEP. So when we send students to charter schools, sometimes they have special education teachers, but if they are not able to provide those services, then we get a call and we need to make sure those services are provided. So we sometimes need to send our staff out to charter schools.
And
to
that's
do that.
included in this budget number, the 60 some odd million?
Yeah,
You're showing?
yes. Well,
Okay,
there are staff and yes, their salaries are in this budget.
okay, thank you.
To give you an example, a little over a year ago, I asked Kimberly in a budget property meeting, can you get your account, start tracking our costs of the Lionheart School? So somebody like you comes up and I can answer that question specifically. We say we can't do it right now. We got too much on our plate. We've got a lot of things we want to do. We've been distracted.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Matthew Hale from Hancock. Thank you to the volunteer members of the school board for all of the work that you do. It's a lot of work and you take it on with good cheer. I feel it's important to make this point because it hasn't been made here, I think, yet. We're here because the state of New Hampshire ranks 50th in support for public education. They've downshifted costs to local government who only has one way to raise revenue, and that's through the property tax. So in order to fix this, we have to have the legislature have the intestinal fortitude and the political will to try and right 40 years worth of legal decisions that they have not abided by.
Pam Kingston, Temple. First thing I want to say, Mason, our students were part of that district when the withdrawal took place. It took multiple attempts of voting. I will be honest and say I voted no the very first time that Mason requested to leave. After educating myself and understanding what they were capable of doing, I, as well as a supermajority, voted yes, that they could leave, and they've done a fabulous job in Mason of not only forming a district, forming their own SAU, educating their students, tuitioning their kids into Milford. Mason was a donor town, just like Dublin, Francistown, Temple, we're all donor towns because we pay more cost per student than any other towns in the district. I could understand why they wanted to leave, and they've done a wonderful job over there. So I'm just saying, for someone who didn't believe in it initially, I absolutely do believe that if a town can show and believes that they can educate their kids, who are we to keep them from not leaving? Question: should Mason or should Francistown and Dublin get the votes they need to leave? What happens to the articles of agreement that currently say we will maintain maintain elementary schools in Francistown and Dublin. Does Francistown and Dublin get struck out, or do those articles of agreement get rewritten?
Thanks for the question. It's our understanding, and I asked Dean the other day while we were walking down the hall, they will remain intact, just less Dublin and or Francistown.
No slight changes of the word, we may maintain elementary schools in the following?
Nope, it will remain as is. The only difference being if either town withdraws, they're removed.
Okay. Next, the petition warrant article, regardless of what you believe, whether it's the way to go or not the way to go, the spirit of the article is sending a loud and clear message again, as I think you've heard voters through this last year say, you've got to find ways to contain costs. And I know how hard it is because my husband is on the school board and I know what he goes through and how much time he spends crunching those numbers. However, every little town, not every, most of the 9 towns have formed their own school study committees. Temple has formed a school study committee last year as a result of the article that was placed on the ballot to close our elementary school. Our select board were very specific when they formed our committee and stated, we want you to look for alternate ways of cost savings in the district. Should it result in withdrawal from the district, fine, but we want you to look elsewhere first. We've worked very hard since last spring and through the summer and the fall, have come up with one plan that would be cost savings. We have gone to all of the select boards with the exception of Sharon and presented it. Our select board specifically said, please present to the school board. We requested 3 times now to present to the school board what the committee has come up with, and we have been denied 3 times. We have also been told to speak to the superintendent. We have made 2 phone calls to the superintendent's secretary, have requested time with the superintendent to sit down, pick her brain, get her feedback. We have gotten no response. We have sent 2 emails to the superintendent, have received no responses from the superintendent's office. So my frustration when I sit here and listen to this and hear the doom and gloom that's going on about Dublin and Francistown, yet there are people in your community that are trying very hard to work with you, not on the school board, to find other ways of saving money, and we refuse to present. I find it frustrating, annoying. I don't know what other word I can use, but thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the time to look at the district. I have to note, Pam, that you did come to the Selectmen's Advisory Committee and present the plan to us. I did bring that plan in front of the board when I gave a committee update at the following board meeting, and I presented it to the board as you presented it to us, and the plan was also distributed to every board member. We all got copies of it. I read it 3 times, and I'm happy to talk more with you about it.
I can't address that one, but the same question was asked last night in Dublin. The gentleman asked, have you seen Temple suggestion and have you acted on it? I said, yes, we've seen it. No, we haven't acted on it. We hadn't had the time.
Hi, Donna Smith from Greenfield. My question is, it's a comment. Could you actually clarify to me what the SAU for if Francistown and Dublin do decide to go on their own districts, why do we have to carry the main SAU for them? I mean, the RSA, sorry. Why are we overseeing their schools if they are going on their own?
Because there's a difference between a school district and an SAU. Okay. They'll be their own school district, but they still will belong to the SAU because a new SAU will be set up that will include whatever districts are determined by that vote.
So they
Okay.
can't create their own district?
They can create their own SAU. They will be their own district.
Why
Okay.
wouldn't they create their own SAU so that way they could be all on their own and they're not part of Conval?
That's a choice that they can make.
So-
But they're just like the withdrawal process. It is a state statute around how you withdraw from a SAU.
So then I kind of feel that you're misleading the voters in the fact of your presentation. You've got this big gloom and doom, how much our taxes are going to go up for the staff to control their schools, which if their plan originally is to not be under our rule at all, why didn't you kind of show both sides of that? You understand what I'm saying? But why in, but it's saying that the other towns are gonna be charged extra money because we're gonna need extra staffing to do their payroll and this and that. That should not fall on any of the other towns. If those two towns are leaving, they should be totally independent, which if they wanna leave, I totally agree with them. But that, in that sense, that's still that we have our thumb on them. Well, I think that should be part of the presentation, that this is the plan, so that it doesn't look like, okay, now your taxes are going up 20%.
Well, I think he showed different. The big problem is until the vote occurs and until they are set up as a legal entity, a school district, none of the negotiations around any of those things can occur. So that's the first thing. And that's why we've had a hard time saying, when people say, give us the exact cost. Well, it depends on, are they going to have a separate SAU? Are they going to still belong to this SAU? If they still belong to SAU 1, then each district has to have a separate budget. You cannot have a combined budget
I
for
understand.
different school districts. So that means instead of running one budget, we're going to be running 4 budgets. An SAU 1 budget, a Francistown budget, a Dublin budget, and a Conval school budget. And that's where the extra costs within
I
the,
understand that, but that was not presented in to look at your presentation. It only showed the one aspect, that this is what's going to happen if they leave.
Let me
It
ask-
didn't say this potentially they are considering, you should had a talk with them saying they are considering to move on their own completely. So this is a potential cost, but not a definite cost. That
Right.
is showing
Let
that
me-
it's.
Let me just make a comparison. We know what the budget is this year. We don't even know what the budget's gonna be next year. Do I include are you guys gonna vote for the bargaining agreement? Gonna vote for the trust funds? We have that in place and we can dissect that. We don't know the next year because we haven't gotten there next year yet. We don't know what's gonna be included. How do you forecast out? So many variables. The biggest variable is tuition. in this equation.
Yeah, but you must know if Francistown is planning on going on their own and if Dublin is planning on going on their own. You, as
take
the
it.
school board members, you should know if they are planning that.
Okay, so the two things to pull apart here are the SAU costs associated with them being under our SAU and making it more complex from a time and time management point and a cost point. The driver that we predicted for that is $321,000. That's not the big driver of what makes costs potentially go up post-withdrawal in the district. That's stretched out by the bigger piece of the smaller pie. I did acknowledge that they have intended, they have stated, their committee has stated their intention to leave the SAU, but that's something that they have to bring to the voters of Francistown and decide after this vote happens and should their withdrawal pass. So it's a separate step that's down the road. And given that it's a vote of the town and not just their committee, it's one we need to hold our breath on. And because we don't know the outcome, we just have to look at both sides of it.
I understand that. Thank you.
One last comment. I built the model, the feasibility model, so anybody on the feasibility committee could run their own scenarios. They can project out 20 years if they want. It's the capabilities there. The quality of the input is what matters. The model, who knows what's going to happen?
But my whole point of the whole aspect is this whole presentation, I think is a scare tactic.
It's
Because
real. It's
I
reality
think-
next year.
I
That's scary.
I really think that the aspect of the way that this was presented was not presented with other options, with what Francistown and what Dublin's future plans are if they do get accepted to. You're just showing the worst scenario of the world's going to end if they move out of the
We
district.
showed two scenarios. One was 7%, 7.5%.
You're just beating around the bush. So.
6 or 7%. We showed two scenarios. The biggest variable is tuition. How many people are going to go in and what are we going to get for it? What are they going to pay for it? Go ahead.
Laura Mafera, Francistown again. Earlier, someone asked why it would cost the district more if Francistown or Dublin left. I don't feel like maybe you got a complete answer, but part of it is that both Francistown and Dublin pay more into the district than it costs to educate our students in our town. So when our money goes away, we are no longer donating the extra money. So that explains part of that. But my question to you is, if it were not a town such as Francistown or Dublin, if it was a town that doesn't pay what it costs to educate their kids, because there are towns, it's just the way the funding formula works, not because a town doesn't want to pay, but the way the funding formula works, there are towns that do not pay what it costs to educate their kids. If those people were trying to, that sounded bad, but if that district was trying to withdraw from Conval, would we be having this big of a conversation? Because at that point, it would likely save Conval money rather than cost the remaining towns.
Can't say it. I don't know. I can't answer that. Somebody put a warrant article in front of us, we'd be discussing it.
I guess it comes down to, is this about money? Is this about education? Is it about community? Because I know as Francistown, we've looked at all of those things. And I sat in on, I'm pretty sure, pretty much every single one of the feasibility study committees, and there was a lot of detail on finances, but there was very little discussion on the education of the students or the effects of the community, which this is what we looked at as a committee, and hopefully it's not all about finances. Thank you.
Costs certainly did dominate the last 8 months, and that goes both ways. That was unfortunately in your town, in the committee. Yes, I wish it had, and we could continue to discuss how rising costs could affect Conval students, and if we end up with a shortfall or higher taxes, what that would mean to the rest of the district's voters, saying Now our taxes are even higher. What are you going to cut? We still face the same challenges. And what do you go into? What do you take away then? For me, there's a distinction. Mason went someplace else. They went to a different school. You're coming back. That's what you're telling us. You're coming back. And in my mind, there aren't great significant changes on the educational pathways set forth by your withdrawal proposals. Yet the district could shift, could become more burdensome, and could become more costly for the rest of us. And it's a distinction we need to make.
Jesse Markham, Dublin. I'd like to make 3 points. First has to do with the issue of difference in funding between different towns. There's a lot of conversation about donor towns and acceptor towns and all these things. Previous speaker did say tonight that you could spin statistics a number of different ways. It is a fact that the towns of Dublin and Francistown pay the most per student into the district, but I would encourage people to also look at tax rates. Tax rates are challenging. It's a bit of a minefield when you go through different assessment cycles, things of that sort. But when you account for all those, what you find out is that, I can't speak for Francistown, I don't remember those numbers off the top of my head, but the town of Dublin actually, for an individual taxpayer, has the lowest costs in the district. If you own a $400,000 home in Dublin and you were to sell it and buy a $400,000 home in any other town, your taxes due to education would go up. So this is not just about the per pupil cost. It's kind of like the gallon of milk thing. I could go buy a gallon of milk, but if I only need a pint, yes, I may get a cheaper amount of milk per ounce, but if I only need a pint, then buying a gallon is a waste of my money. We don't send a lot of children into the district in the town of Dublin, which drives our per pupil cost high, but the individual tax burden is still low. So that's my first point. I just want to put that out there and encourage people to look at those other statistics and not just that one cost the town pays per pupil into the district. That's only one number in the issue of fairness of taxation. The second issue I want to point out is that Dublin is not monolithic. I have no idea how this vote's going to go. I, for one, am against withdrawal. I think it is a terrible idea. So when folks in other towns do vote, you're not necessarily voting against Dublin if you were to vote to not withdraw. You might be voting for someone like me who wants to remain a vital part of this community. I think it's a very valuable community. I think we get a lot out of it. And the final point I make is how easy it is to cast stones. I know how easy it is to cast stones because a year ago, I was standing here casting stones at the people on the stage and in board meetings. I was incredibly upset with the article that was put forward last year. But what I've learned in the last year is how phenomenally hardworking these people are. And I said to them at one meeting, one of the stones I cast was that they were not listening. And I'm here to say tonight that I was wrong. This board listens. This board pays attention. And I think we need to give them a lot more credit. It's really easy to look at you all up here and yell and scream and tell you what you're doing wrong. But it's a lot harder for us to tell you what you're doing right. And I think you're doing a lot of right. I think you're doing a lot of good. You're certainly doing right by me. And I want to thank you all. And I hope that us as a district, we as a district, regardless of the outcome of this budget cap, which I hope does not pass, regardless of the budget cap warrant, regardless of these withdrawal issues, I hope that we as a community can stop casting stones at one another. I think we've gotten to a real tumultuous point. We have a lot of external pressures. And I think we need to start treating each other like community members, like neighbors, like friends. Thank you.
Toward that end and the positive conversation that's gone on tonight here, Alan Edelkind essentially invented these forums. I know there's some history in the district to do this on an ad hoc basis, but Alan is the one who advocated for these being quarterly, systematic conversations, and he deserves a lot of credit for that.
Well, thank you, everyone, for coming out and staying for this meeting. We appreciate all your thoughts and your attention and your questions and your comments. Good night.
So I'll get back to you on later. All right, we'll do it.